Growing up in the 1980s, there was a little slice of heaven in most small towns. No, it wasn't Walt Disney World or Disneyland or even some gigantic theme park. It was at your local McDonald's with a PlayPlace. Almost every American kid wanted to have their birthday party to be held there. It was a type of rite of passage. And if you were one of the cool kids, you were bound to have lots of friends to show up at McDonald's for a birthday party. It was also considered a safe haven, for some reason, by our parents. And let's face it, the prices were affordable, so at least some years it was doable to have a birthday party there. But little did we know what dangers lurked there. Trauma, bruises, scrapes, concussions, bullying, just to name a few. Safety? Well, let's throw that out the window. Sanitary conditions? Who are we kidding? There were ball pits in those things, for Pete's sake. All while we had grease running down our arms, digesting mystery meat burgers and drinking milkshakes that we weren't even still sure if contained milk. Won't you join us tonight in an in-depth dive into the ball pits and playgrounds of our generation?
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So, this one's going to be gross. And I'm just going to start out.
Disgusting.
The first thing I found was a Reddit post that simply asked the question, McDonald's employees, what is the worst thing that has ever happened in the PlayPlace? And the very first comment was, some effing kid climbed all the way to the top of the slide, took off his GD pants, and slid down the slide. Problem is, he pooped the whole way down. There was a effing trail of poo spanning the entire second half of the slide. And that seems pretty
graphic
par for the course.
Yeah, pretty norm, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it was when you first proposed this, and I was looking at it, and I never really thought about it, but there were so many disgusting stories that it was, at a certain point, it was like, I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about, so I started looking into like kind of the history of the PlayPlace and some of that stuff, but I did collect a handful of these anecdotes. Another one that I really enjoyed came from Burger King.
Yeah, we're not just going to pick on McDonald's. It's PlayPlaces, playgrounds everywhere, mini restaurants.
But apparently Burger King had trash cans that would say, thanks for the garbage, once you push the flap past a certain point. And then they were spring-loaded, so you push the trash in, and then the flap would close.
I remember those mouse trap
Now,
kind
of course, curious children would want to know who said, hey, thanks for the garbage, and apparently would routinely stick their heads in the trash can to the point where they would get past the flap, and then the flap would close, and it would catch the child by the neck like a
strangle
animal. And they would flail and scream and, of course, need to be rescued. So
now I am going to say, precursor. I've had 2 kids. I currently have 2 grandkids. I love them all. But kids, how do I politely put this? Small kids are nasty, little heathen, booger-picking, pooping, peeing machines.
Well, it all depends on how you raise them, Eric. So maybe that's just...
Well, my kids still need to poop and pee.
No, kids, well, they have no regard. They don't understand the basics of sanitary behavior.
The common sense just hasn't kicked in yet, But, well, me being the historian, I wanted to go back. I know Bill said he has some of the early history on, like, the McDonald's PlayPlace. I wanted to go back as far as I could. Where did the playground even come from? I learned myself. It started in Germany back in 1848. Now, their core value was teaching kids to play safe and well with one another. Let me just say off the bat, I'm not so sure that concept works so well here in America. Maybe it did in Germany, but not so well in America. Do you remember playing on the playgrounds, even at school? You know, there were those bullies that shoved and pushed you. There were those dares and the challenges set forth by the young hoodlums. I remember one poor kid, and I'll word it as just saying not the sharpest toe in the shed. He was dared to straddle the seesaw and allow this bully to jump on the opposite side and literally rack this kid in the ballsack. Then this kid rolled over, puked, collapsed on the ground, fetal position, to the delight of the young bully, who probably grew up to become either a manager or a politician, or maybe
I think it may have worked for him at
may have worked for him at some time. Well, anyway, that was the original concept, and it took a few decades to catch on here in America. So we went back to 1848 in Germany. Now, the first American playground was announced in 1887 when the Golden Gate Park there in San Francisco opened up our first ever version, the American version. But it would be many, many more years even than that. It would actually be the 1960s before the American playground really gained traction. And when McDonald's made a risky yet bold move to include their version, the PlayPlace, to entice more children to beg their parents to bring them there to play and, of course, eat, which makes more revenue. Now, I got to say, with a little bit of wisdom and a pinch of sarcasm, McDonald's, you were so naughty. Naughty by doing this, but a smart naughty. You knew you were already serving these inexpensive, cheap, fat-based food to these kids. So maybe you might have felt a little bit bad, helping to make Americans overweight. So within an inch of your decency, maybe you just put a playground out there to get those little mongrels some exercise, to entice them, maybe to sell more food. Yeah.
Well,
Probably selling more food, though.
Well, what it was, I believe it started in the 70s in California. They did a test with the McDonald's PlayPlace. And that particular restaurant saw something like a 600% increase.
Yes, huge increase just within the opening in a couple months.
So don't for a minute think they were doing it because they were trying to get kids to exercise.
I was trying.
That was about getting money in those cash registers.
Money. Now this is kind of where we start getting into some of the characters for McDonald's. You know, Ronald McDonald, obviously, Mayor McCheese, Officer Big Mac, the Hamburglar, Grimace the Menace, Captain McCrook the Pirate, and let's not forget the Professor.
Okay, well,
not really sure why we need a professor.
I have forgotten the Professor.
You remember him now, though, don't you?
No, I
really?
don't know who you're talking about.
Had a little lab
he was
coat
like a little
on,
old guy,
glasses.
No, and well, you left out the Hamburglar.
No, I mentioned him. I mentioned the
You said you didn't say Hamburglar. You said something else.
Well, okay, we have Ronald McDonald, obviously. Mayor McCheese, Officer Big Mac, the Hamburglar, Grimace the Menace.
Maybe you did say Hamburglar and I just didn't catch it.
And Captain McCrook the Pirate, because we've got to have a pirate.
The Fry Guys, too.
Fry Guys came later. Along, and then there was a Birdie, I think.
Yeah, Birdie. I remember that. And then the Nugget Buddies, when Chicken Nugget became a thing. The Fry Guys weren't originally called Fry Guys either. They were called, I want to say like Gobblers or something. They were gobbling up your fries or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that until I started doing my research here. So,
yeah, I'm still to this day, the whole thing with the Professor, I'm not really sure. Was he the Dr. Frankenstein creating all the food items in the laboratory in the back room?
He stuck a hamburger head on a human body and.
Was he there maybe as a doctor-esque feature for all the cuts, scrapes, and bruises and sunburns you were going to get from playing there on the playground? I don't know. Interesting tidbit, the designer was never paid for the designs of those characters, which honestly I think are some of the coolest characters I grew up with. I mean,
well, it's
Mayor McCheese and all that. That was pretty weird. McDonald's did, I guess, own, I think it was Ronald McDonald himself, the Hamburglar, and Grimace. They had paid for those characters, and that's why those characters have kind of more recently started to show back up.
Have you ever seen the original live action Ronald with the cup nose instead of the red nose and all that?
I don't
it was
think
Willard
I saw that.
Scott played.
Oh, Willard Scott, the
weird.
weatherman.
Well, I mean, he's a clown, right? We talked about clowns more than once on this podcast. People don't like clowns. And one of my favorite jokes that I've seen recently is, it's from Pennywise from It.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And Ronald McDonald, and Ronald's got this evil grin on his face, and he's like, I've killed more kids than you have.
Oh, my gosh, that's dark. Well, I know Bill's got quite a bit more on the playland from McDonald's, but continuing on with the history, I'll leave that part kind of to him. In 1972, McDonald's had unveiled a test at the Chicago State Fair. Now, they had this real-life park play area for the children to come and try out, and where McDonald's, could kind of test the market, test some of these contraptions. And I've got to say, they had some pretty sinister designs. There was Grimace the Menace, which I didn't realize, but I guess he was originally intended as a villain.
Well, peddling toxic milkshakes not that long ago. I mean, I think we remember that.
Yes, yes. Well, one of the rides kind of favors to that. It had Grimace. And again, this was all pipe, steel construction.
The one that looked like a cage?
He was a cage. Literally, It was like Austin Powers, get in my belly.
Yeah.
He has these pipe prison cell
and
kind
people
of
took
rib
pictures
cage.
of it like it was cute and funny and like, oh, look at the kids in the cage.
And Grimace grabbed a hold of these pipes, almost like looking like his
like he
ribs.
was pulling it open.
And that's exactly what it was a cage for kids. And you could get like, probably 6 small children in there. So that was one of their designs. You mentioned the Hamburglar. They had the creepiest Hamburglar swing set. Imagine the Hamburglar standing up, all pipe construction, his arms straight out, almost like in a crucifixion pose. And each arm was holding a swing that the kids would swing from. Then we had the tug and pull merry-go-round, which I believe had Mayor McCheese in the center. Basically, his big head was in the center, kind of suspended on what I would describe as an upside-down bowl. And then it was one of those merry-go-rounds that you typically saw growing up in the 80s, steel construction. But with the bowl kind of shape there, it almost created a slide where kids had no place to sit, and they would slide off towards the outside edge and be spun off even that much quicker. They had some really bizarre designs. So after they revealed this at the Chicago State Fair, it was a hit. I think they guesstimated that something like 30,000 kids over a period of like a year went to the playground equipment, played on it. They got some good feedback from it.
So back to that Reddit post, there was a comment by user ShagZ101.
Like that handle.
Who had a cousin that worked at McDonald's, and while mopping the floor near the ball pit at the end of the day one day, they could hear older kids, like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, laughing. And when they looked over, these kids had a huge pile of balls that they were gluing razor blades to.
Oh, my gosh.
And then tossing them back into the ball pit. So, as calmly as possible, he went back to the back and he called the police. Now, the police didn't get there in time. Imagine that. But they did take the CCTV footage and they left. Now, when the employees went through and cleared it out, they found at least 30 balls with razors stuck to them. So
this isn't an urban legend story. This is legit.
This is allegedly.
Allegedly.
Hey, this a secondhand thing from a Reddit hand post.
Okay.
Secondhand thing from a Reddit post. I said Reddit hand. That was a
Reddit hand.
Honestly, this kind of started me down a path on ball pits. So I've got some other anecdotes here. Another alleged McDonald's employee user, and I didn't select the username. So, Man Boobs on Fire.
Whoa.
He gave the following assessment of ball pits. Quote, kids literally take their Happy Meals in there and forget. Heavier things are always at the bottom. Then there is a layer of chicken McNuggets and such. 50% of the ball pit is, in fact, edible. Then it's 25% balls and 25% poop.
We're going to be talking a lot about poop, pee, and balls tonight.
Another ball pit tale came from user AJizzy23, and I like this. This one made me crack up. I laughed out loud. I saw a kid lie on his back in a ball pit and slowly sink down. He made eye contact with me for half the time he did because I was staring. I went to that area again and he was gone. It was like he knew there was some sort of void in the ball pit, and he just wanted to become one with it. Now, if you take a look around these days, there are no more ball pits. The ball pits are gone.
I think the last of them probably got put out for sure by 2020.
Yeah. Well, where did they go, Eric? The truth is, the iconic ball pit became the target of urban legends. Really, the internet killed the ball pit. Of course, these stories ranged from the outlandish, such as venomous snakes and syringes filled with heroin, to the entirely likely half-eaten chicken nuggets and cheeseburgers.
And a few milkshakes.
Yeah. But basically, the ball pit became a cesspool of every parent's fears.
Mm.
Now, the ball pit itself was invented by Eric McMillan, a self-described wild and feral child who roamed the debris of post-Blitzkrieg Manchester. I mean, he was out there in the wilds of bombed-out England.
And I love what inspired him.
Oh, yeah. So, while working for SeaWorld in San Diego, one day, he was looking at a jar of pickled onions, or so the story goes.
Yeah.
And McMillan began to wonder just what it would be like to roll around amongst those pearly orbs.
What kind of creep is this? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, and of course, that grew, and the idea of climbing amongst soft plastic balls took root. Now, he created the world's first ball crawl for SeaWorld, and throughout the 80s and 90s, the ball pit spread across North America. It became a part of McDonald's PlayPlaces and Chuck E. Cheese's around the country. Now, as it tends to do to many beloved things, the internet began to spread rumors and attempt to destroy the ball pit. The internet is really good at that. The first real tragedy, the first tragic story of the ball pit was that of Kevin Archer from Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, after playing in a McDonald's ball pit for his birthday, his mother noticed he had a welt on his behind, and there was the broken end of a hypodermic needle under the skin.
Oh.
Now, the story says that he began to suffer violent seizures, his eyes rolled back in his head, and in the end, Kevin's autopsy determined that he had died of a heroin overdose.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a very sad story. It is 100% garbage.
Oh.
There is no McDonald's ball pit in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, I was wondering. It's like, okay, I didn't want to say that. But
Now, versions of this story grew and they changed, and the location changed, the town changed. Eventually, the story was supposedly happened in Texas. So, but there is no
proof.
There is no documented case of a kid getting stuck with a needle full of heroin in a ball pit. Now, of course, despite the story being fabricated, it did take root and terrified parents around the world. I know my grandmother would have 100% have been the kind of person that would have said, "Oh, you can't play in a ball pit because I heard this story."
Gotta get the heroin overdose.
Even though this single story wouldn't have been enough on its own to doom the ball pit, other urban legends began to grow. The stories of venomous snakes coiled underneath the balls, waiting to strike at unwary children. Now, like the needle story, there's no evidence this has ever happened, and a ball pit filled with rowdy children and plastic balls would be a terrible place for a cold-blooded reptile to rest. Wouldn't be able to regulate its body temperature, no direct sunlight. It would become lethargic, It would be awful. They really wouldn't be there. Now, I did hear a story of children in England finding a hedgehog in a McDonald's. So, I mean, there may be an animal, but a hedgehog's not that dangerous. There. This story became such a big deal that Burger King had to release the following statement. Burger King Corporation has learned of an email being circulated on the internet that falsely alleges the injury and death of a child while playing in a playground ball pit resulting from a rattlesnake bite. To be positively clear, the incident outlined in the email has no basis in fact relative to any Burger King restaurant. And I use the term restaurant loosely for Burger King. All fast food, to be honest.
Yeah.
Burger King Corporation takes the dissemination of this false rumor very seriously and will vigorously pursue any and all remedies available to us against the originators to the fullest extent allowed by law.
Ooh, they hit a nerve.
Well, again, when you're accused of, harboring dangerous animals. Now, even though needles and snakes never resided in ball pits, parents would come to fear something that was even harder to disprove. Replacing reptiles and poisons would be colonies of microscopic viruses and bacteria.
There's something to be afraid of.
And these fears were much harder to ignore.
Let me jump in here. My wife, actually, for a period of time, was an assistant manager at Hardee's. And they had an indoor playground. I'm not sure what they dubbed theirs, but anyhow, it was an indoor playground and had a ball pit. One of her tasks was, her and another gal that worked there after hours, was to go in and try to sanitize. And I say try to sanitize. So maybe not firsthand, but secondhand story from my wife to me. There was never any instructions on a frequency of cleaning, what should be used to clean, how it should be done. And that goes across the safety of all of this playground equipment. And McDonald's, that bit them in the rear end later on for multiple lawsuits.
Yeah.
It was almost like by design. We don't want to know what needs to be done for upkeep and maintenance. But by golly, if something happens, we're going to blame the franchise shop owners, not this is corporate. Fault. The store owners aren't doing their part on trying to clean this. Well, so I did a little deep dive. And when these ball pits, when this playground equipment was created, it was never designed really to have access panels to clean it, because that wasn't even on the table. It wasn't even being thought about. So my wife said her and this other gal went in one night at Hardee's, was trying to clean the ball pit. She goes, where do you put, probably 2,000 balls? Where do you put them to individually clean them so you can get to the container to sanitize, hose that thing down, because that's where, just as much stuff's going to be. She said they did the best they could. They struggled, but yeah, there's no good way to do this. No. There's no machinery. She said we were just, here's a spray bottle and a rag, go in there and clean that ball pit. How? What? It doesn't work.
Well, obviously there's, you got kids crawling around and whatnot. It's going to be nasty.
Nasty.
Now they did test ball pits, and most ball pits tested were found to really not be any more unsanitary than any other playground equipment, which, seems like a weird scale. Like, oh, they're gross, but they're just as gross as everything else. But any hopes the ball pit had of surviving the onslaught of internet urban legends absolutely died with the arrival of COVID-19. With public concern regarding the transmission of highly contagious diseases, ball pits quickly became a thing of the past. And though we've mostly returned to life as normal, ball pits never bounced back.
Ow, dad joke. Now that kind of brings us to something I wanted to interject here. Why McDonald's or any other franchise, again, we're not just picking on McDonald's, never allowed food to go in the playground area. If you ever saw one of their signs, it was no food beyond this
had
point.
The signs, but it's not like there was a cop to enforce it.
Yeah, there was no cop there to say, hey, little Bonnie or Brody, you shouldn't have your cheeseburger in here. But, one might kind of think, possibly, well, McDonald's and the restaurants are trying to look out for us. They don't want food in there because we all know kids are going to lose food. They're going to dump milkshakes and all this. But there was a little bit more of a sinister reason. If they allowed food inside the playground area and they didn't at least have that posted, that was all their legal obligation was, is, hey, it's posted. Little Johnny didn't pay attention.
I love the idea that as long as you make a sign, it's all okay.
You're good.
It's like most businesses that, if they don't want you to bring a firearm, like, well, where we used to work, had the sign on the wall that says no firearms.
Yeah.
Now, that only stops a person who looks at the sign and goes, oh, okay, I'm not going to bring my gun.
I'm not going to bring my pistol in tonight.
But to be fair, seriously, like legally speaking, would it be good enough for them? Well, we had a sign.
Yeah, there was a sign.
It said not to bring their gun in. Well, if somebody's going to do something like, yeah. So, yeah, the idea that like this sign that says, hey, don't bring in any
fixes
food.
Everything.
It's like the signs at the pool, like don't pee in the pool.
Yeah,
the 3-year-old kid's going to totally follow that.
Yeah. Some 3-year-olds, if they're told that, they're probably going to challenge that. But if they allowed food in these areas, well, then now they become more legal obligation to clean up and sanitize.
Okay, I did read about that because, if they allow food in there,
that's a
then
food
they
area
have to
now.
sanitize it the way they would the rest of the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a cost savings, time savings thing.
And again, let's face it. Children are just nasty. They're gross. Love them to death. Part of them at least. But they are nasty. So another thing with kids, and we touched upon this even just moments ago with the sign, some of these children are angels and some are demons. And children don't have any common sense, I guess, when it comes. There's no etiquette. There is no mannerism. Like if a kid needs to take a pee, he's liable just to pull his pants down in front of the other kids and just make that slide a water slide. You know what I mean? That's just the way they are. I
feel like at times you're confessing to things that like I remember when I was a kid.
Oh, no. My kids were always told, proceed with caution. To be honest, both of my kids are germaphobes a lot like I am. So often they would not even go in those playground areas.
My kids, God, to be fair, I don't know how many times I actually took them inside a fast food place. Now, I know my in-laws were more prone to do that when we were with them.
Right.
Like my in-laws. And then, of course, you got to let the kids play and blah, blah, blah. But my kids, we would go to the park more than we would go to something like this. I very rarely go inside a fast food restaurant when I do eat fast food, which I try not to.
Well, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of the saying fast food.
Well, and to be honest,
you get it and you run.
Well, and yeah, to be fair, in my experience, I don't care what the policies are. Those places are rarely sanitary enough for my taste.
Germaphobe?
When you sit down at a table and your arm sticks to the table,
yeah.
Even
some of the stuff that you see people wiping it down with, it like makes it sticky.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Well, anyhow, again, the concept, there's a little common sense here that comes in for the restaurant as well as even us parents. Because, let's face it, you got a little kid. Let's fill their bellies full of milkshake and chicken nuggets and some French fries and some extra ketchup and an ice cream cone. And then we're going to just wind them up, turn them loose with all this sugar. They're going to puke.
And hope they're not lactose intolerant. Or like when you shake a can of soda,
Yeah.
You get it all gurgled up. And
again, it's when children are small, when something goes in, it doesn't take very long for it to come back out. So it's not a good policy to feed your kid up a whole bunch of sugar and stuff and then just turn them loose to run around and get hot and crazy and chase each other. And it's just a recipe for disaster. As I mentioned before, I did find out there was no national standards to cleaning any of this stuff, which leads to the gifts even that Bill kind of alluded to. Even when they brought the playground equipment inside, they went to plastic, hard plastic, molded. We had bacteria that was left on the balls, on I call them gerbil tubes, those slides.
There was one of the Reddit responses, the gerbil tubes, was that a kid was crawling over and there was a family seated below, like a couple of grandparents, and the kid peed.
Oh.
And of course, they've got the little holes.
Oh, yeah.
They got a shower.
Drainage. Ooh. But it led to urinary tract infections, pneumonia, meningitis, blood infections, infections of the heart. You had said when they tested like the balls from the ball pit, they didn't really find it anymore.
It was no worse than any other place
area.
in the play. In the play place.
In the play place.
Like typically the ball pit was no less sanitary than the things around it, which, to be fair, doesn't say a whole lot.
Well, I was listening closely because I came across a newspaper article, and it talked about how much bacteria was on a single ball from a ball pit. Well, they stated was more than the bacteria taken from a general public restroom toilet seat.
Here's the thing, though. Clicks, views, however you want to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
I did stumble upon a lot of these, and I read some of them. But the idea was a lot of times they were skewed for the people that would want to read those. Oh, they're filthy, disgusting,
right.
Blah, 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 blah. A lot of times those bacterias would be normal, relatively,
maybe off
safe.
Your kitchen floor.
It would be the same kind of, like the bacteria that's just on your skin. Like
right.
Everybody has a certain amount of bacteria. Or in your nose or whatever. A lot of these would be regular, run-of-the-mill, normal, safe bacteriums. It wasn't like they were swabbing them and they found Ebola or anything like that. You know what I mean?
I got you.
But when
you put it in that context,
if I talk
it
about
elevates it.
Yeah, if I talk about the common cold, but I give you, the scientific name, and then I say, oh, this everybody's got this in their I could probably convince people to rinse their noses out with whatever I wanted. No, you all have that, but it's like a lot of them were punched up for effect. I think what I read.
And that makes sense. It does make some interesting reading because there was a Reddit post that I found that was supposedly a young couple who had found love at McDonald's and married.
Is this the one with the slide?
They both worked at McDonald's and after hours commonly went to the ball pit to get frisky and have sex.
I read another one that they would go to the top of the slide, the little cubby hole there, the cube.
Yeah.
And they would enjoy one another's company and then slide
in the moonlight
and then slide down the slide without, and apparently a lot of kids would complain about the top of the slide being sticky.
Ooh.
That was the one that I was like, the more I read, I was like, one,
I need to stop.
Well, I was kind of a germaphobe kid, so I don't remember playing in play places all that much. I know I did, but not a lot. And again, grew up kind of poor. My family, we didn't eat out a lot. So the more I read, the more I was like, thank God.
Thank God I didn't go there. Well, I think you've got some more. I'll let you kind of dive in.
Well, we've told all these stories. We've talked about injuries and the horrific things, and we've shared these anecdotes from Reddit. But there were some very, very real things that came out of this.
Indeed.
The story of Dennis Williams in 1986, who slid down a metal slide and arrived at the bottom with a look of distress on his face, shaking his hands as if he had dipped them in hot oil or something while squealing, basically. And then shortly after, a young girl emerged from the slide with a pink burn on her calf.
That was a brother and sister. I remember that story.
Obviously, the slide was way too hot. And of course, like we've said before, it's out there baking in the heat. Williams suffered second-degree burns and sent him to urgent care.
How did McDonald's reply to that? Well, they tried to deny that whole incident with the slide and the second-degree burns for several months, but then finally paid an undisclosed fee, and then, as any good manager would do at corporate level, they attacked their store manager and staff. They released in a newspaper article stating the injury was in direct violation of the store manager not having routine maintenance performed on the slide.
Huh.
Now, it was a metal slide. It's outside in the sun. The injury was it got too hot.
Yeah.
What is the store owner supposed to do? Sun, stop shining down. Don't get hot. I mean, what are they supposed to do? I thought that was so stupid, but I can totally see that at a corporate level.
And his case was just one of hundreds reported throughout the 70s and 80s. In addition to burns, children also suffered concussions, broken bones, even skull fractures were documented. Most incidents came from the jail-like Big Mac Climber Jungle Gym. Now, in 1999, it was revealed that more than 400 children had sustained injuries from the Big Mac Climber alone between the 1970s through the 1990s. And McDonald's did not report any of these injuries. Instead, they just slowly phased out the Big Mac Climber. They replaced it with other structures, padded equipment, and eventually moved everything indoors. Well, replacing all the equipment and moving it indoors ultimately didn't protect McDonald's from suffering legal repercussions in the end, as in 1999, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission launched an investigation and fined McDonald's $4 million after accusing them of failing to report injuries sustained at their restaurants.
Going back to, I'll call them the Mc lawsuits, there was over 3,000 McDonald's restaurants having some form of these industrial playgrounds set up. And it does stand to reason, just if you're a numbers person playing the numbers, there would be injuries and lawsuits. The more you've got, the bigger risk you're going to have. Reportedly, 1,500 injuries were claimed to McDonald's. I think Bill touched upon by like 1991. There was another case involving a 9-year-old little girl. This article I found in the Los Angeles Times. Now, she broke her leg while playing on the equipment. McDonald's was forced to pay $700,000 for bulk damages to the family. Now, I wonder if that little girl, 9 years old, ever saw any of that money, or hopefully the parents put it back as a college fund or something.
Well, what year was that?
That was 1991.
Well, to be fair, that was probably half of what it took to pay her medical bills.
Probably so. Now, a lot of these other 1,500 injuries, they were very minor. Cuts, scrapes, bruises, as anyone would expect. Got a bunch of sugar-infested little demon children running around chasing each other, for Pete's sake. But there were some other ones more serious, and repeatedly it seemed like children were getting hurt in the same way on the same ride, similar to what Bill had mentioned. One particular was broken noses, and it seemed to occur a lot when children would turn around and face plant into the McFry trees. Now, this wasn't even part of a ride. This was just, I don't know if it was made out of a hard plaster or a concrete, but like a statuary. The pictures I saw, and from what I remember, they were 4 foot tall, 5 foot tall maybe. But yeah, these kids would be chasing and just turn around and face plant and break their noses as they would run into this because it was such sturdy construction. Another one, busted teeth from riding a spring-mounted Rocky hamburger ride is what it was described. Now, these is one of those that
they still
you might remember. They got the
got the
huge
big
coil
metal
spring
coil and
mounted in the
bounce back and
ground, and yeah, it's kind of like a rocking horse or some design. Well, this had a giant, like Big Mac's head, and the kids would get to rocking and rolling just a little bit too much, and it would, like literally a cowboy at a rodeo, fling their face down into the cheeseburger and knock out their teeth. They also had whiplash issues with their neck and head on such rides, not to mention they would often fall off, possibly even spraining or breaking their legs and stuff when they fell off. So I guess I got to go back to who made this stuff. Who was the designer for the playground equipment? We'll pick on McDonald's for McDonald's stuff right now. Well, obviously the Ronald McDonald mask, you would assimilate that this all came directly from them. But no, there was a company that McDonald's hired exclusively. It was called JBI out of Long Beach, California. Now, this company was sued 21 times alone on one particular playground ride. And that was that McDonald's tug-and-turn merry-go-round that I mentioned that looked like it had Mayor McCheese or Big Mac's head and kind of the upside-down bowl. Then it had these bent pipes coming out towards the center, interlocking, basically that the kids would hang on to as the merry-go-round went around. The company did seem to care a little bit more profit over safety, imagine that. But what are they going to do? They joked about it. Some of the people that worked there came forward and said, what are they going to do? Sue us for a 22nd time on the same piece? That was kind of their mentality. It was found that over 800 of these particular rides didn't even have their safety devices installed. But it all kind of crumbled around them when in 1988 in Bakersfield, California, a 6-year-old Marlene, a little girl, climbed onto this metal model of a tug and turn. She was playing with a friend when her shoelace became wrapped around an exposed bolt. I'm assuming that's what they mean by safety equipment, probably covering exposed bolts and nuts. Because I was like, they don't have seat belts, so I wasn't real sure what they meant by that.
A lot of time when you have something like that, at least, like even when you build like a piece of furniture at home, you have little caps that you cover that stuff with.
Cover that.
So I would assume that, that might be what they meant.
Well, 6-year-old little Marlene was playing on this when her shoestring came basically wound around one of these exposed bolts that didn't have a cap. It ripped the shoe off her foot. Now, I don't mean it pulled it off. It ripped the cloth, the shoe, tearing it off and breaking her leg in 2 places as it drug her around in circles, screaming. The family sued JBI Corporation, the creator for the rides, for $10 million on the grounds that the company had not only designed this flaw and not fixed it, but they had known of this problem for nearly a decade and had done nothing to remedy it. This goes back to being sued 21 times on this rides alone, just the safety issues.
Well, did they have a sign, Eric?
They probably had a sign. Children play at your own risk. Hey! But hers was not alone. There were 120 claims against that one ride alone. Here's just a few of the other examples. We had severed fingers. We had dislocated elbows. We had child concussions. And Bill, What have we talked about on the podcast about child concussions? What does that make? Serial killers.
Oh, I was going to say something totally different there.
We all know child concussions can cause serial killers to be made. Now, in individual, we had a $36,000 awarded to a family of a girl when her neck was injured when she fell off a McDonald's fry tree. Again, not even a ride, but just one of those heavy concrete plaster statues.
Well, I bet the sign said not to climb on it, though.
Well, she was apparently climbing on it. It wasn't attached to the floor.
Well, that'll
and
do
it fell on her and struck her in the head. Now, I didn't try to move any of these. I do remember them. I bet you those things weighed 300 pounds or more.
I don't remember.
It was like they had a chicken wire kind of mesh, so they were hollow, but I think they literally coated it with like concrete or something. I mean, it was very robust. $9,300 was paid out to a family of a child who suffered skull fractures from just a fall off of one of the slides. $1,700 was awarded to a family of a boy who fell off one of those spring-mounted rocking contraptions that we talked about and broke his arm. But miraculously, no one was ever killed on or by one of the McDonald's playground rides. Nope, that title goes to Burger King, actually in St. Louis, Missouri, not too far from us, when tragically a 4-year-old little boy was killed on April 29, 2001. The young boy had gained access to an area not intended for play. It's pretty vague in the article and the description, but I'm assuming this was kind of a maintenance access area, but it was between two parts of a playground structure. Somehow there, the little boy became pinned and crushed in between two parts of the ride. Wow. Now, to top it off, I saw in one newspaper article he was attending a birthday party there. In another article, I read that it was his birthday party being held there. That had to have been quick, I would have thought. If there was a birthday party, there would have been other kids around, but he got pinned. It was pretty vague, but tragic nonetheless. Finally, in 1988, a good year, by the way, one which I graduated high school in, JBI decided enough's enough. We've been sued. These lawsuits are not going to go away. They discontinued the whole tug and turn merry-go-round as well as all the other McDonald playground rides. And today, that playground equipment is highly sought after by McDonald's collectors around the world. There is a gentleman in Texas that boasts he has one of the largest collections, multiples, duplicates, and occasionally he does sell some. I saw an article where a gentleman from upstate New York traveled all the way to Texas and actually bought one of those tug and turn merry-go-rounds. Ended up buying a couple McDonald's playground signs too. Dropped somewhere in the vicinity of $10,000 for this stuff.
I'm going to go on record.
Officially, Bill is on record.
I do not understand people that collect corporate memorabilia. Like the people who are like, oh, I've got all this Coke stuff. I've got all this McDonald's stuff. I can understand a piece of culture. I have a lot of stuff like alien stuff or even historical things. I have a huge collection of shark teeth, fossil shark teeth.
Including some megalodon.
Yeah. But,
so you don't get like the Walt Disney collectors and stuff?
Okay, again, I look at some of the Disney stuff as cultural, though. But if you were just collecting things because it had Walt Disney logos and whatnot, I wouldn't get that. Now, if you were a huge fan of Beauty and the Beast or Little Mermaid or something, or just Disney animation in general, I mean, I sit across the table as someone who, Disney's bought my entire childhood at this point. Marvel, Star Wars, all that stuff. I have a bunch of that stuff. But I don't collect it because, like, ooh, Disney made this, or ooh, Marvel made this. I collect, like, I like the Marvel stuff. I like the storytelling. I like the characters.
Yeah.
So for me, I just don't understand that. Okay, I think a better way to, I have, the Tolkien books.
Mm-hmm.
I like Middle Earth. I've got all the movies.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
But it would be like saying, I'm a big fan of Tolkien, or no, Bantam Publishing. It'd be like saying, I'm a fan of Bantam Publishing, and I have all these books published by Bantam. I don't give a crap about 99.9% of Bantam's catalog, which I might be wrong which company actually publishes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I care about Tolkien's stuff, you know?
I would think maybe if you worked there growing up, maybe.
As someone who's worked for corporations,
I don't
even that.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah. Okay, you got me there.
You're going to go out and collect, well, yeah.
Yeah, we won't.
We're not going to name names, but...
We're not going to name it. But answer, no.
No. Well, Eric, you seem eager to get to headlines.
I do have a kind of a sinister story. This is a creepy pasta story.
That's not a headline. That's a story.
It's a story, but it came out first as a headline in a newspaper article, which I tracked down.
Like an urban legend kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I found it actually mentioned in creepypasta kind of stuff. So
I have heard it said creepy pasta, by the way, and I hate that.
Pasta?
The idea is it's cut and paste.
But
pasta just makes more sense.
I never thought about that.
I don't know which one's correct. Yeah. Because it's a story that gets repeated, right? And since it's online, it's a computer thing. It's copy and paste. So I've heard people say pasta, but I always say pasta, creepy pasta.
I'm going to go with creepy pasta because I'm a foodie, I guess. But
it sounds weird, honestly. But yeah, that's what I've always said too.
There was this manager who no name was given, reported to the local police on several occasions there was a group of what he described as middle-aged men, mid-20s, who he believed possibly was living in the nearby woods behind his McDonald's. Now, he had to ask this seemingly revolving door of different faces, as he described it, to leave the playground area, not on one, not on two, not on three, but dozens of occasions, to the point he even had to involve the cops. At one point, one of the cops had said, basically, they need to purchase something to come in here. You can use that as a way to keep them off the playground equipment and, out of the restaurant. So he thought he had this all taken care of. But then this group of what he described as creepy middle-aged guys would come in and order a cheeseburger with no meat, but extra ketchup would be applied. So basically bread, cheese, and then they would take the ketchup and they said just put an obscene amount of ketchup on it. Enough to say they were making a purchase to set inside. Yes, Bill,
okay.
You have something you definitely want to say.
Okay, just from a purely fiscal standpoint, if they're only doing it to make the purchase, why customize it at all?
That's weird.
You're spending the same amount of money.
Yeah.
It's not like, take the burger off. Oh, well, that cuts the price. No. McDonald's ain't doing that.
They don't do that. Yeah.
They're going to charge you more if you add something, but they're not going to charge you less if you take it off.
$1 for an extra slice of cheese.
So
that's weird.
Even if they're just doing it to prove a point, which I get also that this is a fictional account, but still, that's weird.
That is weird. But this is what triggered the manager to know what was going on. All of these men would come in and order the same cheeseburger, no meat, extra ketchup. And he found out just exactly how many times these people were coming because, of course, this was the franchise owner. He's not going to be there 100% of the time. He's got different shifts, different days. Probably most of them own multiple stores. So anyhow, he got back with the police. Police said, are they harming anybody? Are they doing anything? And he's like, well, no, but they're creepy. They're freaking my customers out. The police said, well, there's essentially nothing we can do if they're not harming someone or, indecent exposure, anything, something. They're playing by the rules, and unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with it. Well, this story kind of took an unexpected twist a few weeks later. An employee by the name of Kevin Wilcox. Now, this is the newspaper article that I found, so it's kind of intertwined. This Kevin Wilcox, he was just an employee there, was coming in early for his morning shift, and for whatever reason, he got there a couple hours early. I guess there wasn't enough time. He didn't think to drive all the way home. So he decided, I'm just going to go and I'm going to take a nap in my car for a little while before my shift starts. Where he parked, the playground was on the opposite side of the building. So he did not have a view of the playground. He kind of pulled up underneath the tree nearby the woods, kind of there, not really for the shade because the sun, I from what I took, wasn't even out yet, but was just taking a little nap. And then he was awakened. He recalls that there was this man that came up out of the ravine, up out of the woods area, and he had kind of a trench coat on, and he went directly to the McDonald's building. And Kevin said, I'm just an employee, but there's no reason anybody should be around the building. It's not even open at this point in time. And the guy looked a little creepy, so he decided he was going to follow him. So he gets out of his car quietly, and he sneaks around, kind of hides behind the shrubs there. And he notices that this man joins 6 to 8 other middle-aged men that are already at the playground. These other 6 to 8 men are running around the playground, in his words, carrying knives, chasing one another. Even more bizarre is that they were covered in what appeared to be ketchup. One particular man was in his underwear, was all he was wearing, and ketchup.
Eric, if you're going to sit here and tell me you've never ran around a McDonald's PlayPlace in your underwear covered in ketchup, I might have to call you a liar.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Why?
Now, obviously, this is a playground that is outside because the building's still shut down. McDonald's is not open, won't be up, from what I can tell, for at least another hour and a half.
He says fenced in?
They had like a little tiny fence, but there was just a little gate to get in. Some of them originally had wooden poles with ropes.
Oh, okay.
So you could just
maybe
like
back in the day
duck underneath the ropes. I mean, there was really no safe area. Well, this just got creepier and creepier. He watched the man that he'd followed, and the other men acknowledged him when he came in, but he went over to the Grimace jail cell. 3 small children were tied up inside and had duct tape on their mouths. He said, I fell back against the building, shivering in fear. This man went over, took the knife, and was dragging it along the rails, the poles, if you will, the pipes. And these children kind of fell back trying to get away from him.
Now, Eric,
you
tell me you've never terrorized children in a McDonald's PlayPlace
that had their mouths duct taped with a knife in your underwear. Yeah. At this point in time, he scurries to his feet. He knows he has made noise and got acknowledged by at least a couple of these guys, these hoodlums running around in their underwear and covered in ketchup and trench coats. And then he sees a little boy hanging upside down from the Hamburglar swings. Basically, Hamburglar's got his arms out, as I mentioned, in that crucifixion pose. And there's a kid hanging upside down.
Now, this is not a true story, correct?
I found this in a newspaper article, but then I found this almost same story as the creepy pasta, however you want to pronounce it. So, no, I do not believe this story is real.
Okay.
I tried to track down...
I'm sitting here joking, and if this was true, it'd be awful.
Oh, my gosh.
But
horrible.
If it's if somebody read something on Reddit and then turned it into an article thinking they'd stumbled on something.
That's what it appeared to me, is somebody had come across this, so they had fabricated a newspaper article. I could find, and I didn't reference it because I didn't feel it was real. I'd looked in that town. I'd looked for the information. I didn't find anything besides this one newspaper article that could have been easily made in fraud.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time something like that happened.
Exactly. But you can see this got my attention. I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah, you talk about horror stories.
Oh, well, it gets even weirder. The guy races back. Now, of course, you got to remember, this is before cell phones. He knows he's got to get help. He knows he has triggered the attention of part of these ketchup-wearing, underwear-stalking maniacs playing in the playground. He runs to his car, and he notices just across the street is a payphone. Now, some of our listeners may not even know what a payphone is, but he races across the street, and he does successfully call the police. The police acknowledge him. They tell him that they are on their way to be safe, to get away from the area, lock yourself in your car until we get there. So he goes back to the car, and here's one of the guys in the trench coat with a knife pulled, smiling, waiting at him. while he's wearing a Ronald McDonald mask and a half-burnt red wig. He said, I just took off running. I went down off the ravine, and he pursued. And he goes, I ran. He goes, I don't know how long I ran. It was for several minutes until I felt I had escaped. I didn't hear footsteps. And he comes across an old building that he later says is most likely a hospital building or a school, with a bunch of old playground equipment around it. And there was like an interview in the newspaper article saying, well, did this stuff look like it was dumped there? And he goes, no. At first it was a building. Then he goes, but with the playground equipment there, I honestly think it was like an old school. So the playground equipment was already there. He goes in the building, looks out the window, and on the other side is this makeshift camp. There's tents and stuff. The people who are staying there, the homeless or these maniac middle-aged men, have somehow wired into an overhead electrical power line and got limited power in this building. He says that they have covered it with McDonald's graffiti, posters, French fry wrappers, hamburger, Happy Meal boxes, just like plastered the walls with it. Then he goes back. He said the building had several rooms. Part of it, the roof was totally collapsed on. But he found one room that was a kitchen where they had some food and some limited electricity. Found another one that was a bedroom, had a VCR, and had a tape in it. And it appeared to be some type of an old instructional deal for a Ronald McDonald character. And the story at this point in time, you can just tell is not real. It goes off. The Ronald McDonald figure climbs back through the window with a knife. He starts watching the VHS tape at some point, and it's all like they're chopping up small children to make the burgers. And I mean, it just goes so far off the rail. But at this point, I have went down this rabbit hole, and I'm like, this is going to be my headline. I know Bill's going to give me crap for it, but this is going to be my headline because it lured me in, hook, line, and sinker.
You see, Eric, in the early days when I first introduced the concept of the headline, I didn't really give direction because that's not my role. We're a partnership here. The idea was always to pick a headline.
A headline.
Like something from the paper or the news.
Well, there was a newspaper article.
Yeah,
it was fake.
And
there was one.
You've come a long way. But in the early days, every now and then you'd pick something and I'd just be like, what is he talking about?
What is he talking about?
So this one, I mean, yeah, you found an article, which is crazy enough, but it just sounds like somebody found a story online and was like, oh,
we're gonna pump this up a little bit, give it a fresh tweak.
And again, it's happened before. So, well, mine's a little more down to earth and boring in comparison.
Well, let's hope so.
Well, it's from Reader's Digest. So that doesn't help with...
My grandma and grandpa used to read those.
My grandma, too. She got me a subscription to it. I only ever read the jokes.
Yeah. Reader's Digest...
I'd skim through it to get to the jokes.
Never really appealed to me too much.
So from Reader's Digest by Megan Jones from June 11th, 2024. This could be why you don't see play places in McDonald's anymore. So the venture into restaurant-adjacent playgrounds experienced a heyday from the 1970s to the 90s. But there are several potential reasons why their numbers are dwindling today. Now, these outdoor playgrounds did have their drawbacks, as we talked about earlier, and so were gradually remodeled and moved inside. The indoor playgrounds were far from immune to public concerns, aided by the advent of the internet, the horror stories that came with it, some true, some not. We talked about that earlier.
Absolutely.
Now, one mom named Erin Carr Jordan, she embarked on a personal crusade to hold McDonald's and other franchises accountable for calling these often grimy, graffiti-laden places kid-friendly. Now, her research discovered that 49 out of 50 fast food playgrounds tested positive for some kind of potentially dangerous bacteria.
49 out of 50.
Now, we talked a little earlier about some of that. Now, in response to the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, McDonald's closed all play places. And as of the writing of this article, they remain closed. The McDonald's website says that the closures are, quote, in compliance with state and local social distancing requirements to help reduce the further spread of COVID-19. They also say that the play places are only temporarily closed. And now, while these health and safety concerns were a little problematic for McDonald's is obviously no stranger to scandal, and the playgrounds still persisted despite all that. Now, the playgrounds would soon have to contend with a more dangerous threat, however. And I left this for the end here. The kids just simply aren't playing in McDonald's play places as much. Now, as mentioned earlier, the internet is a hotbed for rumor, but the internet has harmed the play place in a more direct and lasting way. You are far more likely to see kids sitting on smartphones or iPads
Absolutely.
than exploring the play place. Kids have all the play they need right there in the palm of their hands, and as such, the playground's target audience is using them less and less. And this is the most likely reason McDonald's is putting its funds elsewhere. In other words, the amount of attention they're getting may not be worth the cost of maintaining them.
Makes a lot of good sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many kids anymore even go outside and play?
Oh, we talked about that a lot with my kids. But, well, we can get, when we do our follow-up fear episode, we can talk about, like, there were definitely reasons why I may have been, me and my wife were probably overprotective, and I would say you probably were too. So, but yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. If when I go to break at my work, I take a little coffee break, as it were, in the morning. I don't drink coffee, but, far be it from me to pass up an
It's better than
opportunity
doing
to
a
take break.
smoking break when you don't smoke.
But when you go into that room, I don't think you see two people having a conversation.
Everybody's
on their phone.
Yep. So, Bill, I think I already know the answer to this. I think both of us were probably way too old to play in ball pits, but I think our children could have possibly played in there. If so, what might be the weirdest thing or item you or your family, or maybe somebody your family knows directly, found or witnessed in a ball pit, or if not a ball pit, one of the play areas?
I was going to say ball pit I don't remember anything ever being found that was weird or whatever in a ball pit.
Or anything related. But first hand, second hand, something pretty close.
I will talk about a piece of equipment, maybe.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, the town city park in Waynesville, down kind of on the banks of the Ruby Doo.
Yeah.
If you go to the park and then you can kind of go off over the hill. And
we've
walk
actually
down to
taken
Ruby
our kids there before.
When I was growing up, they had a piece of equipment. It was, I'll call it a watchtower, for lack of a better word. It was a steel pole, probably went up 6 feet, was attached. There was a steel plate attached, had a hole cut in one side so you could crawl up through and you get in this watchtower.
Okay.
Had little short wooden walls around it, and it had like these little swingy cannon things on the corner. I can't imagine that was super safe. Like, I can't imagine kids not falling out of that thing.
You climb up a ladder to get to it, or
Yeah.
they have like a little post?
I had a little ladder that you would climb to get up into it, and it was probably 6 feet off the ground. And of course the graffiti. I can't tell you how the slide, even here in town in Ashley Park, the graffiti on the slides. My kids would be like, "Dad, what's this mean?" I'm like, "I'm not explaining that to you."
Yeah.
So I don't know that we ever found anything weird, but there was like I said, that one piece of playground equipment always seemed weird to me, although as a kid I loved it. And then just the graffiti in general. There's a lot of stuff people write for no good reason. It's kids' playground equipment.
Yeah. And with the graffiti, I think a lot of times rust comes with a lot of that, the old metal equipment.
Yeah.
There's rust and sharp edges. Well, to answer my own question, I was definitely too old to be playing in ball pits. My kids, as I already mentioned, were kind of semi-germaphobes. That really wasn't their thing, too. Not saying we didn't take them occasionally, but Alex, who helps us here at the podcast and helps record, my son, years after this occurred, shared a horrific story, as he described, to a place we took him. And some of you will relate to this. It was a place called Chuck E. Cheese's. Now, I remember thinking to myself, even at that time when Alex was maybe 8 or 10, man, that is one mangy-looking rat mouse, animatronic. Let's face it, that fur outfit, costume, whatever you want to say, it didn't look like it had been bathed, cleaned, or washed in a decade.
If your kids would have been a little too old for this, but if you go online and you watch John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, he does a segment on Chuck E. Cheese, and I get an absolute kick out of the original concept for Chuck E. Cheese, because he wasn't a mouse, he was a rat, and he was like an insult comic type with a thick Brooklyn accent. So I'd be like, hey, what do you think you're doing there? Hey, you know, like, it was funny because he was like rude.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, you have the modern skateboard riding Chuck E. Cheese on the
hipster
skate, you know.
one.
So, but yeah, sorry.
Well, he says, you know, again, this was years later. He goes, Dad, that place used to scare the crap out of me. He said, between the weird mangy rat mascot to his other similar furry costume army of robotic, you know, animatronics, and then there was that a little bit intimidating dim lighting. At least in our local one, there was a lot of...
Well, arcades in general had that. And
yeah,
it was
a lot
basically
of
an
dark
arcade.
corners. Yeah, but they had the stage and the lights that would come out on them. And, of course, it was animatronics.
The curtain would open and it would be dark. And so you just kind of see these shadowy figures. And then the animatronics would start to move and they'd have the clicky robotic sounds.
Be a little slow, kind of distorted at first. Now, we didn't have this at ours, but I had to go online and I found a video. Literally, this is stuff nightmares are made of. It was on one of those stage platforms, and it wasn't Chucky. It was one of his cohorts in the back. Part of the fur had fallen off of the face, so you could see some of the animatronics. And he would sling his head around, and like this flop of fur would just kind of. And this kid's look on the video was just priceless. But that was the closest thing I could come up with is, and I do remember, again, thinking as a parent to myself, why would any kid want to come here? Well, I guess my kids didn't either, but I still drug them there.
We thought it was cool. There was another like knockoff one, and I can't remember the name of it, but the band was called the Rockafire Explosion. I remember that much. They had one in Springfield, Ohio. Showbiz Pizza.
Oh, Showbiz. Okay, I've heard of that. Yeah.
My grandma would take us there from time to time, and I remember it being kind of weird. But so, what is the worst PlayPlace/playground injury that you have witnessed personally or were told about? Preferably one that's actually happened.
I do have a first-hand account, and it was over here at Ashley Park, ironically, that you just mentioned. We were over there, I want to say, for one of our kids' friends' birthday parties. And, you know, back when we grew up, they had the traditional chain swings. And it was the deal to see how high you could swing. There was this little boy, I'm guessing 12 years old, standing up in the slide where, you know, your butt should be, is where his feet is. And he's hanging on to the chain.
You said slide.
I'm sorry, not slide, swing. He was standing up in the swing, not where your butt is supposed to be. He was standing up inside, hanging on to the chains of the swing, and just, I mean, excessively swinging to the point it flipped over the entire top.
That is just the dream. That was what we were all aiming for as kids.
But I don't think he got what he aimed for. I think he was trying to do that, but upon doing that, I think he freaked out and he let go.
Oh, God.
This kid fell, it had to have been 12 foot, into the soft gravel that they had underneath
the padded gravel.
And that kid came up, Bill, there was gravel stuck in his face. There was, it bloodied his nose. I probably lost some teeth. Now, he wasn't with any of our kids. He was just, I want to say, like a kid from the neighborhood or something. But that was horrific, even for me.
Wow.
And I remember looking at us like, that kid's going to get hurt. And I mean, it wasn't 3 seconds later. And it's like, he's going to go full 360. And he did. And he just, I think, panicked, freaked out, let go. And of course, gravity takes over.
We used to try to swing as high as we could and then jump out.
Oh, yeah.
And then hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And was actually surprisingly good at that as a kid.
I don't think I would be
but
so much
I wouldn't
anymore.
want my kids to do it now.
I wouldn't want to try it anymore myself either.
When we were talking about the PlayPlace thing, my daughter told me a story from when she was in school here. They were out on the playground, and I guess a kid was on the monkey bars or something, and this little boy wore glasses, and he fell. And when he fell, he panicked, I guess, and swung his arms around, and he knocked his glasses off or knocked them sideways.
Mm-hmm.
And when he hit the ground, it drove the earpiece into his eye. So that was the one that came to mind when I had that question. She told me about, when we were talking about the topics, she told me that story.
Oof.
So that would have been here in the last 12 years or so. Or no, less than that. She's 16, so probably in the last 10, give or take, which I don't remember hearing of that particular accident, but, you know, they don't report that stuff.
Oh, yeah, so they're not going to publicize that kind of information. Well, we hope that we have at least made you raise your eyebrows a couple times, maybe even pondered, were we horrible parents for taking our kids to places like this? I know that thought crossed my mind. Or maybe what our own parents were thinking when they were taking us to these safe havens of sanitary conditions to have a cheeseburger and milkshake with friends. We hope that you've enjoyed at least some part of it. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this. Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us, if you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us. Reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
But any hopes of the ball pit had of survive? Nope. I want to say, but any popes. I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.